Story 1. Not that anyone asks, but the main scar I have is on my forehead. It was caused by my father when I was about 8 years old during one of his infamous outbursts. He was furious about his cup of tea being cold because my mother made it and added too much cold water. His reaction was to throw the cup, made of tempered glass and shaped like a hexagon, at her while I was hiding behind her, and it missed and hit me instead. The impact was significant, but as I reeled from the blow, I spun and stumbled, hitting my head again on the corner of the piano, with blood gushing between my fingers as I held my head in pain and cried. He came up to me from behind and pulled me to my feet by my hair. Realizing I was actually hurt, my mother grabbed a towel while he started the car. Rushed to the hospital. I cannot remember much between being at home and waking up at the hospital covered in bandages. I have a permanent dent in my forehead, a large scar stretching from my left brow to my left ear, and a lot of trauma from realizing that almost nobody cares. Not something I can easily bring up in conversation. Story 2. My father burned the right side of my face for speaking out against his war plans, and then he exiled my uncle and me. Story 3. I tell people that the scar along my lip is from being bitten by a dog when I was a baby. The truth is that my dad threw a mirror at me because I wouldn't stop crying. The mirror hit the wall and shattered, and some of the glass cut me. I didn't remember any of this because I was a baby, so it doesn't really affect me at all. My mom and my aunts told me years later because they were all there. I confronted my dad, and he got mad at me for asking. The story about the dog is the one he made up. He told me a dog bit me, and he rescued me and got rid of the dog to cover up what really happened. Story 4. Self-harm. That feels like a lifetime ago, and I've come out the other side a much happier person. My default response is to joke that it's from a bear attack. It usually gets a laugh. I don't mind sharing what it's from once I've grown closer to someone, but I don't always have the mental energy to help a well-meaning stranger through their discomfort at hearing the real answer. Thus, a gentle deflection is often the best choice for me. Story 5. I got stabbed in the back and have the scar to prove it. Actually, I went to the after-hours clinic because I had a really bad cough. When the doctor placed the stethoscope on my back, she asked, "What's this?" in reference to a coin-sized rash I had for a few months. It turns out she was our local skin cancer doctor, who was on duty that night. She sent me back to my general practitioner to get a referral for her surgery so it could be removed. Story 6. I have several burn scars on both of my forearms. I was a drug addict and an alcoholic, and I heated my home with a wood stove, which resulted in many small burn scars. When I tan, you can see them clearly. Story 7. When I was 3, I tripped and cut my head. I was running around and bumped my forehead on the door frame. My mom picked me up and could see bone. She got my sister and me in the car, forgot to shut the front door, and then crashed through a fence at the doctor's office. Apparently, they had to wrap me in a sheet so they could examine the injury and stitch it up. That night, I pulled the stitches out, so instead of a scar that is a line, there is a wide dent in my head. Story 8. If I cut my hair short enough, I have little bald spots all over my head. It used to be just a handful that were chickenpox scars. These days, they're mostly from a shattered windshield embedding itself into my scalp. My head went through a windshield from the outside to the inside, then back out again when they slammed on the brakes. Inexplicably, it didn't even knock me unconscious, and my brain showed no real injuries as best as could be determined around 20 years ago. I can't say the same for my legs, knees, spine, ribs, and shoulder, but miraculously, my brain fared pretty well. Story 9. I fell down a ladder when I was 6 and broke my arm twice. I had to have multiple metal plates to straighten my arm again. Hence, I have 3 scars. Story 10. I had a cut on my right hand from getting slashed with scissors, a 5-centimeter scar on my right arm, and a smaller scar on my chest from my mom. None of them really hurt except for the one on my chest, which sometimes feels painful with visible purple bruising, but I don't really care. I've gotten Child Protective Services involved and went through therapy, saw counselors, social workers, alternative schools, got antidepressants, and now I'm still alive. Things aren't as bad now as they were back then. I just feel really lonely and apathetic about everything. Video games, manga, and anime have been nice distractions. Thank you, Mom. Without you, I wouldn't be the person I am today. Story 11. I tell everyone I went through a windshield, and thankfully they believe me. I didn't go through a windshield. Story 12. I worked at Lowe's in the millwork section. Things were pretty slow in my department, so they sent me to help in receiving. I was unloading boxes at a quick pace when I felt something scrape and grind against my left index finger. I pulled my hand out, not thinking much of it, and turned around to tell my coworkers to be careful, as there was something sharp sticking out of one of the boxes. They were standing there, mouths open and speechless, looking at my hand. I jokingly said, "That bad? Huh," before realizing my finger was gushing blood like a horror movie. I asked one of them for a bandage, and they both said, "That's a hospital trip, dude." They took me to the first aid room where my manager met me. She patched me up as best as she could and called a taxi to the hospital. When the doctor was stitching me up, I asked if it was cut to the bone, and he didn't answer. I tried to look into the wound, but he pulled my hand away. Since then, I've gouged my finger on sharp corners in cabinet shops, accidentally touched it to a belt sander, and bumped it against many objects. My poor finger has so many scars that it is a bit of an eyesore. I'm surprised I haven't lost it yet. Story 13. I got my scar from a man named Voldemort. He tried to kill me when I was a child. It has been a wild journey since then. Story 14. I have a rock climbing scar and a dirt bike burn scar, but people only comment on the black eye I received when I tripped on a sidewalk crack while walking too fast. Story 15. Not a scar, but a birthmark on the bottom of my chin. When people ask about it, I tell them an old wives' tale about how your birthmark is where you were killed in a previous life. Then I say I was shot. After that, I walk away, leaving them to realize who I am referring to. Story 16. Retrieving a frisbee from next door resulted in slicing the palm of my hand open on a broken milk bottle. Story 17. No one asks about it, but I wrestled with a very small schnauzer and now have a scar on my shoulder from it. Schnauzer 1, me 0. I also got rope burned from a tether attached to my dog, who ran past me really fast and hit my ankle. Additionally, I cut my thumb on a cheaply made measuring cup, and it still has a scar. Story 18. I was skipping rope in the gravel because the boys had decided the whole asphalt area was theirs to play soccer on. I fell and some stones got into my wound. Story 19. The scars on the middle of my back are from intercourse, the one on my elbow is from a large shard of glass, the ones on my hand are from drumming and playing ice hockey, and the ones on my thighs are from having shingles. Story 20. I have a scar on my calf from a broken bone that came through. Puckers when I am flat-footed. People often ask me if I was shot. Story 21. Solita storia. Una bicicletta. Un salto troppo ambizioso e l'asfalto che non perdona. Ma almeno ho vinto la cicatrice. Story 22. I was volunteering at my local horse facility when I hit my knee against the metal mounting block. I didn't notice until later that night that a flap of skin was hanging out. In another incident, my best friend and I had a physical fight in the locker room. She accidentally hit my hand with the lock, which resulted in a blood blister that I can still see a year later. In return, I flipped her over my shoulder, but she didn't get any lasting scars. Story 23. I have several round white scars on my hands, arms, and chest. They resemble cigarette burns in size and shape. These scars are actually from spider bites I sustained in my apartment in Bangkok, where I lived in a remote area and did not have a modern place. I was particularly susceptible to their venom, which caused my flesh to erode and not heal. Story 24. When I was 4, I tripped and fell with both my hands against the glass screen of the wood stove. My hands kind of melted against the glass. Now at 30, you can still see it. My left hand is the most obvious one. Story 25. The scar on my back is from surfing and catching a fin. The one on my forehead is from a golf club when I was 7 and my friend was trying out his dad's clubs. The scar on my eyebrow is from wakeboarding and taking the board to the face. The scar on my leg is from a skateboard. The scar on my knuckles is from opening a beer bottle with a lighter, not realizing it was actually a twist-off. The scar on my chest is from my teenage years when I was with a big group in the woods behind a YMCA smoking weed, and when the police showed up, we all ran. I tripped on tree roots and something put a gash on my collarbone when I hit the ground. Story 26. I had an irregular mole on my left side, which was quite large. I noticed it looked suspicious and decided to have it removed. The stitch removal date arrived, and everything went as expected, no cancer. Shortly after my appointment, my child had a doctor's visit. When I bent down to pick her up, I felt a sudden pain on my left side, reopening my wound, which could not be restitched. Now I have an oval-shaped lump of scar tissue. Story 27. I had a birthmark that was potentially cancerous, so I had it removed a few years ago. However, the surgeon made errors with the sutures, and given the location on my shoulder blade, it resulted in a prominent keloid. It is very noticeable and people often ask me about it. Story 28. I had a large cyst removed. Instead of a cool story about a bullet wound or something similar, they just say, "You." Story 29. I have a scar on my forehead from an incident when my older sister was carrying me, and I fell face first into the metal ledge of the stairs. She lied for over 10 years about what happened and convinced our parents that I got the scar by pushing a chair and hitting my head against it because she didn't want to get in trouble. Story 30. I was trying to bring my little sister out of the children's play area so we could go home. I think I was 8 and she was 5. She bit my hand, resulting in scars. Story 31. I managed to drop an entire mini fridge on my knee. After hauling it 4 blocks on foot, I was at my doorstep when it slipped out of my hands. I tried to raise my leg to catch it before it hit the floor, but it gashed my knee open. I paid $30 for the fridge and $300 for the emergency room. Story 32. I have a scar on my arm shaped like a 7. It consists of 2 scars from different incidents. The first occurred when my arm went through a screen door, and the second happened when the same arm went through a window. Story 33. I bumped my head on a bed frame when I was 2 or 3 years old. The only thing I remember is running and then seeing the bed frame less than a foot in front of my face. Despite having a deep and wide gash on my forehead, my parents say I was really cheerful. They recall that I spent the time waiting in the emergency room playing with another child as if nothing was wrong. Story 34. I remember being 4 years old and playing with water, pouring it into buckets and sand molds, which I arranged neatly in the hallway of the apartment. Suddenly, I stumbled, the water spilled, I slipped, and fell face down on the corner of the baseboard. I felt a sharp pain and a lot of blood. Story 35. Hopefully, it won't be on me for too long since it literally looks like I soiled myself, which I didn't. I was making fries. I got oil in the pot and was frying the potatoes that way. I had some problems with my bowel over the past week, so I decided to go to the bathroom. Sure, I took the fries out, but did I know that oil could catch on fire? Turns out I didn't. When I came back to the kitchen, the pot had more smoke than usual. I walked past it and it caught fire. I panicked as if the entire house was on fire. I called the fire department because of the panic. I ran toward the fire extinguisher but didn't know how to hold it because I remembered that my hands could freeze to it if I held it the way I wanted to. I ran back into the kitchen and thought, maybe water? Then I remembered what happened to my classmate and wondered if a towel would work, but I thought the fire was too large for that. So I said, forget it. I opened the door to the porch and ran with the flaming pot in both hands. I touched the rim of it a couple of times, but I didn't feel anything at the time, maybe just minor stinging pain. So yeah, my math teacher asked if I needed to talk to someone. That was funny. Story 36. I accidentally hit myself in my right brow with a tennis racket while trying to return a serve when I was around 14 years old and attending a tennis school. I still can't explain how that happened. Anyway, I always mention that we were playing doubles, and my partner's racket hit me when we were both reaching to return the same ball. Story 37. I have 2 cuts on the top of my left forearm, and they look pretty nasty. They are from being drunk and flipping hot wings in the oven. My cramped apartment has the oven next to the wall, and the door cannot open all the way. Story 38. I have a large scar on my forearm from self-harm. I had 9 stitches and can still see the stitch marks. I tell people whatever story I can come up with because it's obvious that it's a self-harm scar, and I know they are just being curious. My personal favorites are a shark attack or a knife fight, which isn't entirely inaccurate. Story 39. I had a girl over one night when I was 22. I had only been home from my deployment for a few months. We were in bed when she suddenly asked me, "Oh my gosh, is that where you got shot?" I looked at her, and she had a surprised expression while pointing at my left side. I searched myself for marks and didn't see anything until she tapped my arm, where there was a quarter-sized scar on my upper left arm. I started laughing and told her it was a shot, but not a gunshot. Everyone who gets the smallpox vaccination has this scar. Over the years, it has come up a few times. Story 40, motocross crash. The lens broke and cut me across the nose and eyebrow. Story 41. When I was a child, I fell on a sharp step during a game of chase and cut my eyebrow. Due to my family's religious beliefs forbidding driving on a Saturday, they did not take me to the hospital and stitched the cut at home. Story 42. I have a significant scar on my back from sneaking into a bull paddock one night with my friends to go cow tipping. I scraped it on some barbed wire as I was coming up. Story 43. I have burn marks on my forearms. They are from waiting tables and carrying hot plates. They resemble cuts, though. Occasionally, people ask me about them with sympathetic looks in their eyes. I always explain the cause, but they do not always believe me. It is interesting how people cling to their assumptions about others. Story 44. I have 2 noticeable scars on the front of both legs. Usually, only children ask about them. Both stories may sound unbelievable, but they are completely true. The scar on my right leg is from falling into an unsecured manhole, which was quite unfortunate. The scar on my left leg is from swimming too close to a dam and getting pulled under, dragging my leg across some unpleasant debris. When I was younger, the scars were much worse and more visible, almost as if one accident had tried to take both legs. Story 45. I had my appendix removed. I was initially misdiagnosed with an ovarian cyst in the hospital simply because I was a woman. By the time they performed the surgery, my appendix was nearly ruptured and had adhered to surrounding organs, which made my recovery significantly more challenging. My scars are also larger than those of others I know, so I hold the hospital accountable for that as well. Story 46. I tried to stop drinking on my own in my apartment when I realized I was dependent on alcohol. I woke up on a blood-soaked mattress with a trail of blood leading to the counter where I had collapsed and cracked my forehead open. I'm lucky, though. I have been sober for 2 years now. Alcohol dependence is no joke. Story 47. I got punched in the face in my high school locker room, but it's not the punch itself that left me with a scar. Instead, it popped out the lens of my glasses without shattering it, and that cut my eyebrow. Story 48. There are 2 scars. One is at the outer edge of my left eyebrow, which I got from hitting my head on a metal slide in 4th grade. The other is on my upper arm from when I used to self-harm. It healed oddly, making it very noticeable. Story 49. I cut myself pretty badly while shaving my legs. I didn't even realize I had cut myself until I came out of the shower. There is a small but visible scar close to my knee. Another scar that nobody asks about is on my left middle finger. It's hard to see unless you use a flashlight, but it's there. I occasionally experience extreme hormonal irritability and anger about 2 to 3 days before my period. These feelings are always directed towards myself and never towards others. One time, I was at my friend's house sewing together when she stepped out to go to the bathroom. I don't even remember what I did, but something went really wrong and I had to redo my work from the last hour. Apparently, my brain and body's natural response at that time of the month was to angrily strike the incredibly sharp fabric scissors I was holding against the table. I cut my finger. I barely processed what happened when my friend returned and asked what occurred. I suddenly burst into tears like a child. Thankfully, she helped me clean the cut and put a bandage on it. This experience is definitely another reason why menstrual cycles can be challenging. Story 50. I had a wife who was beautiful, like you. She told me I worried too much and that I ought to smile more. She got involved with the wrong crowd. One day they harmed her face, and we didn't have money for surgeries. She couldn't take it. I just wanted to see her smile again and let her know that I didn't care about the scars. So I harmed myself. And you know what? She couldn't stand the sight of me. She left. Now I see the funny side. Now I'm always smiling. Story 51. May P. Kami ng elementaria. Den nadapa ako. Malalakao yung sinabi kon dahilan kung bakit ako nadapa. Kasi natapakan ako sa panung isa kong kaklase. Alam kong tanga lang talaga ako. Ayun, punit-punit yung belging pants ko at yung sugat ko sa tuhod na keloid. Story 52. Not a scar, but I had snake bites when I was a teenager. I have permanent holes there now. I dislike when someone mentions it. Story 53. I have experienced heartbreaks and moments of humiliation. They aren't visible since there are no marks. Hence, no one even bothers to ask. I look back at them from time to time and contemplate the decisions I made and how they shaped me. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.